Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this video where we look at the argument that the Quran is divine, it is miraculous, it is from God because of the number 19. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I know it sounds strange to a lot of us, but a very popular argument that Muslims often make that the Quran is divine, that it is from God, that it hasn't been written by men, and that it really does go all the way back from Muhammad to Jibreel to Allah, boils down to the number 19 in the Quran is miraculous, and it is a secret code that demonstrates beyond doubt that the Quran could not have a human author. Because it can't have a human author, because its secret code is so statistically unlikely to occur naturally or even through deliberate human effort, the only rational explanation must be divine intervention. Strange to me, as I don't think like this in regards to my own Bible, and I know that most Christians don't, but there are a growing number of Muslims that are choosing to view the Quran in this light precisely because it's easy to hear things and difficult to prove them. What do I mean by that? Well, you can throw out lots of supposed occurrences of the number 19 in the Quran, but who actually has the time to go and check the data? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just finished the book. I got time. So I actually went and I read a few books regarding this. One of them is actually by Bilal Phillips, a particular Muslim critic of this argument. I found some Quran-only Muslims who also had written about this and looked at their work and their research into this. I read Rashid Khalifa's work where he publishes his data and says this is proof of a secret miraculous code in the Quran that proves it's from God. And boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, is it very bad. It is very, very bad. And again, remember, this is a very popular contemporary argument. Quran miracles, looking at numerology, looking at gematria, looking at supposed mathematical miracles in the Quran is very popular right now in 2026. You can find videos online with millions of views, and I want to shut this down. I want to shut this down. I don't like Muslims being lied to, and I don't like Muslims lying to others for the sake of convincing them that they don't have any doubts, the shubha are not real, the shubha are in fact inventions of their own imagination, and they should instead just relax rather than critically evaluating some of the things they've heard regarding their religion. But in this video, I'm going to target one main argument made by those who argue for the number 19 being a supposed miraculous code. In this video, I'm going to deal with a couple of examples, that being the Bismillah, how many letters it has, yes, we're going this basic, but also how many times each word in the Bismillah occurs in the Quran. So let's start. Let's jump right into it. First point, the number 19 is a miraculous number. One of the data points they'll use, and again, they're going to rapid fire these at you, which is why you have to actually break this down. This might not sound very convincing just as I present these 2 points, but remember, this is going to be 2 of like 5, 10, 20. They can add these up very quickly because there's a lot to find, or supposedly a lot to find. So let's jump on the first one. The Bismillah has 19 letters in Arabic. The Bismillah, for those of you who don't know, is the following Arabic expression: Bismillah al-Rahman al-Rahim. In English, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Sometimes those 2 descriptive words are translated differently, but that's a common way of translating it into English. Now, this expression occurs twice in the Quran. Surah Al-Fatiha, Ayah 1, the very first verse of the Quran, and Surah 27, chapter 27, Ayah 30. In those 2 verses, you will find that Bismillah expressed in a written form. And that's it. But, ladies and gentlemen, the Bismillah has a different modes of existing, and this is something to remember because this is important. The Bismillah isn't just a written thing, it's actually a spoken thing in the Quran. And what I mean by that is if you were to look at a Quran written in Arabic today, you'll notice that the very first verse is the Bismillah in the first chapter. And again, you'll find it in chapter 27, verse 30, but you won't see it written anywhere else. That's not because it's not actually anywhere else. It's actually all over the place. It's in every chapter of the Quran except for one. That would be chapter 9. But the way that it appears at the beginning of every chapter is as a spoken part of the Quran. It is said orally, but it is not written. It is not actually a written verse in and of itself, which is why if you hear a Muslim recite the Quran, they will say the Bismillah, for example, in Surah Baqarah, Surah 2 of the Quran. They'll start it by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. But you won't find that written at the first verse of the second chapter of the Quran. But it is there. It's just not written. This is important because Muslims will point at this as being an example of the miraculous nature of the Quran, because there are so many occurrences of the number 19 that you can find in the Bismillah alone. The first one is this. There are 19 Arabic letters in the Bismillah in its written form. That sounds great. Good. Alhamdulillah, we've got 19. And when you check in the normal way that it's written, it does indeed add up to 19. So far, so good. There's a problem here, though. And this again is something that a lot of people wouldn't know. And that is that there is more data to be found than you're being presented with. So it looks as if the Bismillah is written one way. It has 19 letters in it. That's it. That's all there is to it. But that's not true. The Bismillah, in terms of the actual words that make up the expression, those words occur in different forms in a written way in the Quran. So let's take the first word, Bismi, meaning in the name of. You can find Bismi written in the form that you find it in the first verse of the Quran, which is known as the shortened form because it has Ba, the letter Ba, and misses an Aleph, which is kind of like our long vowel for the letter A. But there's also, if you go to chapter 96, which is supposedly the very first thing that was revealed to Muhammad according to tradition, and you look at the first verse, that also has Bismi, but it's written with a Ba and then an Aleph. So one has an Aleph and one doesn't have an Aleph. Obviously, including a letter Aleph, or not including a letter Aleph, changes the number of letters in the word. What that means is you have different ways of spelling this, which means that, yes, you can express the Bismillah as 22 letters if you take one form of it, but there are also other forms of the Bismillah that don't have 19 letters. In fact, there are forms of it that have 22 Arabic letters. So why not use those 22 Arabic letters instead of the 19 letters? Well, they're really just hoping you think that the way that this is written, which of course the Quran wasn't written initially, it was revealed orally. It was men that decided how it was written. They want you to focus on that and only on one way of doing it, not other man-made ways of writing it, because they're trying to combine the written text, which is man-made. That's not what was given to Muhammad. Muhammad wasn't told how to write in the Arabic letters each word. He was instead told orally how to say it. They have to add that man-made part and introduce it to the recitation, because if you just look at the recitation alone, then you don't know how to write it. And if you don't know how to write it, because there are different ways of writing it, then how do you know it's the 19 letter form that you pick? Why not the 22 letter form that you pick? You see what I mean? They're picking and choosing the data to fit with their already pre-made conclusion, which is a number one sign that someone is trying to convince you that something is miraculous when actually they're a snake oil salesman. Point number 2, and this one is going to take a little time to unpack because we're going to have to look at 4 very unique words, but it's worth doing because this is a huge chunk of part of the magical number 19 argument, and I think it's significant because a lot of people, a lot of Muslims I've spoken to, think this is a big part of it. They put a lot of weight on this because it's these data points that when you talk about them, they sound just miraculous, right? So let me tell you what it is. Let me tell you this miraculous number 19. Let me explain to you why the Quran is miraculous. So the Bismillah is comprised of 4 words, right? Bismi, in the name of Allah, Al-Raham, the merciful, Ar-Rahim, the most compassionate. Those 4 words occur in multiples of 19 throughout the entire Quran. All of those words, in 4 different words, all of them just so happen to have occurrences that are multiples of 19 in the Quran. And then you combine that with the whole 19 letters, right? So, wow, not only is there 19 letters in this very important phrase, but the actual words themselves, they occur in multiples of 19 throughout the whole Quran. What are the odds of that? That can't be a coincidence. And might not be convincing to you. It certainly isn't convincing to me on the face of it. But for many people, it is, because wow, like, wow, like, what are the odds? But let's break this down because there's a lot to this, and it's kind of humorous. And well, let's just say it's mostly wrong. That's the funny. It's not a case of, well, you're just looking at the data with selective lenses. You just want to look at it in one way, but not another way. You have a weird methodology that's not consistent. No. It's mostly just wrong. Most of what I said there about these 4 words occurring in multiples of 19, for 3 out of 4 of them, that's factually wrong. And in the one that does, it comes with some big caveats. So let's dig in. The first word, Bismi, in the name of. Now, Rashad Khalifa, who was the guy who discovered the secret code and who wrote books about this, in his book, he has this page that, it's just weird. Let me get it up. Rashad Khalifa, you are a funny guy. Rashad Khalifa, you make me want to cry. Rashad Khalifa, the number 19 is not special. Rashad Khalifa, you sound a little bit mental. So Rashad Khalifa, he publishes data and he actually shows you all these occurrences. He shows you it verse by verse, so you can check the data for yourself, which is great because that's what I did. And other sources as well for the actual occurrence of these words in Arabic. Now, notice there's a very weird and lengthy footnote here, and you'll find this a lot with his work. He likes his footnotes, a bit like, a little bit of caveat here, a little bit of caveat. So he says, the opening statement is Bism Allah al-Rahman al-Rahim. Note that all Arabic letters in this statement belong to the group of alphabets known as the light letters. These are the letters which participate in forming the Quran's miraculous alphabet, the Quranic initials, except the first letter in the statement, and that is the letter B or Ba. Therefore, the word B or Be. Therefore, the word ism is taken as the first word. The word bism, per se, is mentioned in the Quran 3 times. Now, this is a weird thing to say because, hang on, he's been saying Bismillah al-Rahman al-Rahim. Now he's like, no, it's not Bismi, it's Ismi. Because reasons. Which immediately gets my poop detector sensor going because I immediately think something's wrong here. Something smells funny. Why are you changing the words now? Literally the first word, and he's like, okay, so first of all, get the first word and then change it and then count how many times you all right, okay, but anyway, he's basically saying so you have ismi or bismi. The ba at the beginning is prepositional. It's basically the letters that you add. It's basically the letter that you add that changes the word to be by or in something. So instead of the name of Allah, it's in or by the name of Allah. But he notes this and says, well, Be is not one of the mysterious letters, which is a whole other category we'll go into another video. But because it's not, okay, that's why we should ignore it. Just ignore it. Okay. I don't understand this because in his own data, like I'll show you this on the screen. Look at this screen. Look at this data. He includes Surah 96.1, which is the same surah I mentioned earlier that does have the ba. It does have the ba there. Bismillah. Ba is there. So it's also the long form of the word. So he acknowledges that there are different ways of spelling this Bismi word, both the short version without the alif and the long version with the alif. But in his own count, where he counts 19, he includes Bismi, not just Ismi. So he, even though he says he isn't, he does. I don't understand. And then he says in this footnote, if you do include Bismi, which he does, apparently, in his data, because of Surah 96, verse 1, he says you would only get 3 occurrences. So he's combining them? Okay, I guess that's fine. So he's taken both occurrences of Ismi and Bismi. All right, sure. But he doesn't, though. That's the problem. He doesn't. In fact, other Muslims have pointed this out to him. There are other occurrences of the words that don't appear on his list. For example, Surah 49, Ayah 11 is one occurrence of Bismi that is not there. Another version is chapter 11, verse 41. You find Bismi there. Not in his data. Just didn't bother including it for some reason. What's even weirder is even in the written forms of the whole Bismillah, so the first chapter, verse 1 and 27:30, he doesn't include these for reasons. I don't know. He just doesn't include them. Even though they're there in the text, he's not going to add these for reasons. So that's 4 verses of the Bismi, which he didn't include, even though he does include one form of it in Surah 96. So it's not like he's excluding these. He is including the ba, the be at the beginning, the letter B, but just hasn't added them all properly. So basically, there's another 4 occurrences, as far as I can tell, that he's missing. And that's just looking at the written occurrences, right? Because remember, I mentioned earlier that there's actually 112 other spoken but not written occurrences of the Bismillah. He just ignores all of these. He doesn't count them. Why? Only Allah knows. And Rashid Khalifa. Only Allah and Rashid Khalifa know why he doesn't include these 112 other ones. He doesn't like them. They upset him in some way. I mean, it's totally not because if you add them, they don't add up to a multiple of 19. But, you know, he just doesn't want to include them. It's a shame. Oh, well. So let's do some math here. I just gave 4 additional occurrences of Bismi that he ignored. So that's 19 plus 4, so that's 23. Last time I checked, 23 is not a multiple of 19, so that's wrong. Let's have a look, and let's take the 23 and add the 112 spoken versions of Bismi. That's 112 plus 23. Totally not using a calculator for this. 135, I totally didn't just get the calculator out for that. 135 is not a multiple of 19 either. I know, I checked. So suspiciously, if we include all the data and not just some of it, you don't end up with a multiple of 19. How sad. Next word. Now we move on to the next word in the Bismillah, which is Allah, the proper noun. Now, when Rashad Khalifa published his work, he infamously said that the word Allah occurs 2,698 times in the Qur'an. 2,698 is a multiple of 19. The problem is, though, you ready for this, ladies and gentlemen, is that he was wrong. It's not. The Quran doesn't say the word Allah 2,698 times. It says it 2,699 times. He was off by 1. So he reconciled this by saying the Quran was corrupted. Chapter 9, the last 2 verses, 128 and 129 of chapter 9, are man-made insertions, according to Rashad Khalifa, which is all kind of forms of funny to me. Muslims will often not even know that you have to assume that the Quran is corrupted to make this miraculous number 19 argument, but hey, like either Muslims know about this, like some Muslims do know about this, and they just go, oh well, we just reject that, not being aware of the consequences, because he says they're man-made for a reason, right? His code doesn't work if you include those 2 verses in the Quran. So in order to believe in the miraculous number 19, you need those two verses to disappear. Anyway, all Muslims just don't know about this, which is really sad, which is why you have to remind them, first things first. Okay, you believe in the miracle number 19? Okay, so you accept that the Quran is corrupted. The Quran we have today is a corrupted, man-made version because there have been insertions in it. Chapter 9, the last 2 verses, verse 128 and 129, are man-made additions according to you, if you believe this. Because otherwise those numbers 19, they don't add up, you know? You need these verses gone. Coincidentally, I believe it's in verse 129. Might be in verse 128. Want to check me on that? I'll put it on the screen. There is an occurrence of the word Allah, which is very, very useful since he was off by 1. He missed 1, but if he can just get rid of one occurrence of the word Allah, then his data's correct again. And the miracle 19, it's cooking on all cylinders, you know? We've got all gas hobs running if we can get rid of 1 occurrence of the word Allah. And he finds it in the last 2 verses of chapter 9, and by saying they're corrupted, he manages to get 2,698 again, which is a multiple of 19. We got there, ladies and gentlemen. But sadly, you can actually just search this. If you look for any kind of Quranic dictionary, they'll tell you it's 2,699, and I'll just list them all for you so you can fact check it. Sadly, the computers back in the 70s were not powerful enough to do the calculations of the Quran, apparently. But of course, people called him out on this. Muslims called him out on this, and he had to say the Quran is corrupted. Anyway, that didn't work. That was a bit of a fail. That was a bit bad. So far we have 2 out of 4 wrong. 2 out of 4 of these are just not true, factually speaking. That's bad. That's really bad. Let's look at the third one. This is Al-Rahman. Al-Rahman, drumroll, ladies and gentlemen, does actually occur 57 times, which is a multiple of 19 in the Quran. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, we finally got there. We actually got a number that lands. That really is a multiple of 19. Whew. Now, I checked this out, and as far as I can tell, conventional wisdom is that yes, it is 57 times, which is a multiple of 19. You can argue this kind of based on what you consider words and what you don't, but the way that I understand the data, it does actually seem like this is pretty consistent. So yes, 57. But it's still not out of the woods, because you still have to accept really convenient and suspicious ways of counting. So it's 57 only if you count the written occurrences of the Bismillah, but not the spoken occurrences of the Bismillah. The spoken and unwritten ones, of which there are 112 more. Well, let's just do the math, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just do the math. You know what? If Avery got logic, if he just reads, we just read, then here, ladies and gentlemen, a Crystal Speaker's Corner, we just add. That's what we do. We just add this thing and this thing. We put them together. We mix it around. That's what we do. Right, let's do it. 112 plus 57. We get 169. 169. Is that a multiple of 19? No, ladies and gentlemen, 169 is not a multiple of 19. So isn't it suspicious that he has just chosen to take the whole data set and exclude the majority of it? Because if he included the majority of the data, or all of the data, he would end up in both instances with a number that is not divisible by 19. Ooh, not looking good. Now, we move to the last word. Al-Rahim, the most compassionate. In his work, Rashid Khalifa says that this added up to 114 occurrences in the Quran of the word Al-Rahim. The problem is that's wrong. Surprise, surprise, the person who got it wrong in one way also got the data wrong in other ways, which is a treasure trove of humor that I thoroughly enjoy. So he said 114. People actually did the math on this and checked. They just added, and they got to 115. So he was off by that pesky 1. That 1 keeps coming back up in the Quran and being a pain for all the Muslims who just want to take away 1 at certain key parts so they can have this multiple of 19. And this secret code, they want it to be a real thing. But sadly, it just isn't. Al-Rahim occurs 115 times, which is not a multiple of 19. But remember before, ladies and gentlemen, I said, to make the whole Allah thing work, the 2,698, he needed to get rid of 1. So he said the 9th chapter, the last 2 verses, verse 128, 129, he said they were man-made additions. Well, it just so happens that in verse 128, Muhammad is described as being Rahim, or the merciful. This is interesting because that would mean that if you get rid of these verses, you get rid of 1 occurrence, which means you're back down to 114, which is a multiple of 19. I like how this is going. It definitely doesn't seem like someone is trying to sell me snake oil at all. This definitely seems legit. This is definitely the kind of person I would want selling me a second-hand car. This is definitely the kind of person I would want giving me financial advice. This person should not be an accountant or do any job with numbers at all. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this goes on. He tries to justify this by saying one of the reasons we can know that these verses are man-made, particularly in regards to 128, is because it describes Muhammad as being Al-Rahim, but he cannot be Al-Rahim because that's an attribute of Allah, and that cannot be applied to anyone other than Allah. The problem, of course, is that the Quran does this all over the place. For example, in chapter 48, ayah 29, we read this, where it describes a community of people, but I think this is also prophetic in regards to Muhammad as him being described as the merciful, or being merciful in some way. So yeah, the Quran clearly doesn't think the same way that Rashad Khalifa does. Oh dear. So let's summarize this, ladies and gentlemen. We've looked at 2 points: the Bismillah having 19 letters. What are the odds? Turns out you can write it actually in different ways, including one with 22 letters, and you can actually substantiate that from the Quran itself using Surah 96 ayah 1. Whoops. And then the other point, which was that each of the 4 words, all of their occurrences just so happen to be a multiple of 19. Turns out 3 out of 4 of them, I'll say that again, 3 out of 4 of them are wrong. They just aren't true. Only in one instance, in one of the words, does it happen to be a multiple of 19. And even that is sketchy. Even that is immensely sketchy. I would not trust that as far as I could probably throw Rashid Khalifa, right? I would not trust that at all. That is suspicious as anything. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end this video here. We've looked at a core part of the Miracle 19 claim. I think it's important because a lot of Muslims do find comfort in this, and I want to challenge that, and I want to show them actually a lot of the things you find comforting are not factually true. It's not even that the methodology is poor, the consistency is poor. No. Factually, the data is wrong. So it cannot be a miracle unless it's miraculously wrong. So the next time you hear a Muslim talk about the number 19, first of all, ask him if he accepts that the Quran is corrupted. Because of chapter 9, last 2 verses, 128 to 129, are supposedly man-made assertions. And the code requires that, as I demonstrated here, right, with the word Allah. He needs to get rid of one occurrence, get rid of those verses. Al-Rahim, 115, needs it to go back down to 114, get rid of 1 in chapter 9, verse 128. So point that out to them and then show them the data is wrong. You can actually, a lot of times you can just get your phone out. There are some websites that show you Arabic dictionaries where they show you the occurrences of the words, how many times they occur in Arabic, and they'll tell you exactly what I'm telling you here. So good to have these ready and available. But I'll see you in the next video, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you all. I hope you have a great day. Take care.